This episode of the Disruption Lab is taped in front of a live studio audience. Kim, before we get into anything else, I want to get your honest kind of ground level read on the state of animal health in 2026. Where is the industry strong now? Where is it under pressure with everything that's been going on? And what's part of the picture that doesn't show up in the headlines?
The animal health industry as a whole is strong, but there are challenges. And when you talk about animal health, that's so broad, as we were just talking about, because it's all species. So if you're talking about the trends in feline health, it's the era of the cat. So, innovation in the cat space and medicalization of cats is up. Dogs are always strong, but if you look at large breeds, there's a downturn in people wanting large breeds, so it's going more towards smaller paws and new therapeutics for that. When you look at the cattle industry, one of the big things is technology, big tech. New World screwworm is a big focus for us. That's probably language that maybe none of you have heard.
Yeah.
But, this is a disease that is not in the U.S., but it's right at our border. I just read an article the other day that it's 88 miles south of the Texas border, and that would have significant impact on the livestock industry, and which then impacts protein, that impacts grocery prices at the store. So, when you talk about animal health, you have to look at every species, and there are trends and pressure points within each one of those verticals. But as a whole, the industry is strong. Like all industries right now, the global state of affairs and the, tariffs are impacting, energy prices are impacting, just the unpredictability of the movement, with what's going on in Iran, puts pressure on all industries, and animal health is no different.
Yeah, that instability really reaches everything, so for sure. Now, you've spent 15 plus years in the middle of this industry, and I think a lot of people don't know that I think 50% of the global revenue associated to animal health is in this region. But not only is it species diverse, but there's just so many elements, whether it's global animal health, diagnostics, food. It's that whole ecosystem around not just species by species, but also kind of the various elements of each one of those things. But it's an industry that I think that most people, including a lot of investors, maybe don't understand. So from where you sit, what's the important thing to understand about how the animal health industry is structured?
Yeah, when you talk about investors, globally, animal health is a small industry when you compare it to human health. In 2013, Pfizer spun out their animal health division. It's now Zoetis. They're the largest globally pharma company in animal health. And what happened when Pfizer spun that out is investors really started to pay attention to animal health. And when you fast forward now, we're in 2026, this happened in 2013, so 13 years later, we do have more investors that are interested in our space, but it's still small compared to a broader life sciences in general. But we spend a lot of time, which I love what you're doing with educating angel investors, we spend a lot of time making sure that large private equity or venture capital institutional investors, it's like sales. It's never the first sell that is the most important, it's the second one. It's like you may be able to get someone to buy something one time, but what's most important is that they buy it again.
Right.
Investing is the same way.
Yeah.
We don't want investors to make one investment out of their portfolio into our industry. We want them to continue to make the second and the third. So we spend a lot of time educating capital. We think that's really important. But we do see more and more capital partners that have an interest because they see the success. of the industry, and they see the growth. So, that's good for animal health. It really is viewed as an industry that's standing on its own. When I started 15 years ago, animal health, they were really divisions of human health companies. And they were so small, they were really rounding errors. So they didn't get the resources all the time. They didn't maybe always get the research support. And what has happened now is it's become an industry of its own. More investors are interested in it. We have most of the companies that are now standalone. We have a few that are still a division of a human health company, but that's working well for them. There's a lot of support there. The larger companies are getting larger, and so really we kind of don't have a middle class in animal health. And what that's done is I think it's paved the way for a lot of innovation. So it's really important, and we spend a lot of time making sure that we support innovation and entrepreneurs, because it's those early stage companies that are the disruptors. They're more nimble, they're bringing products and new therapeutics into the space, and that's where we're really seeing innovation grow, and that's what's going to advance the industry forward.
Give me a sense for the types of companies within that spectrum, so whether it's the large companies and maybe what they do, through that maybe smaller middle class of companies into some of the emerging things. Like, what type of companies are we talking about? What are they doing? Yeah. What are the kind of trends in the new companies in this space that you're seeing?
Yeah, so on the pharma side, there's really 4 large companies, and they have all therapeutic categories. So it's Zoetis, it's Merck, Elanco, and Boehringer Ingelheim, in no particular order. Zoetis is the largest. The other 3, I can't remember how they're ranked. So that's very important to them to get that right.
Sure, yeah.
But they have so they have companion animal, they have food animal. Some of them invest more heavily into technology. I would say Merck is probably really a leader in that. Zoetis has more diagnostics. Elanco probably has a healthier food animal portfolio, but those companies cut across all species. And then you have some of the smaller companies. There's the French 3, Furbach, Vetiquinol, Ceva. Ceva's really strength is in poultry. Furbach is primarily companion animal, so they're smaller portfolios. Dechra is a UK company that just sold to private equity, and a lot of their products would be kind of off-patent or generic types, but they're really investing a lot in the equine space where others haven't. So those are kind of where you see the larger companies. Technology, we have a call out to Cirrus Tag, who is here. That is a company from Australia. They moved offices here almost 2 years ago. They're the first direct-to-satellite technology company. That's big in the livestock industry. It's important not only for where are the cattle, the health of the cattle. It just helps all the way around. When you have these large ranches, you can't have your eyes on where they're at all the time. So that's a growing space and a growing sector. Elias is here. They have their product has been approved. They have a cancer therapeutic. That's a growing space, and really specialty therapeutics like that are really growing. So you have a number of companies like Elias. We're really fortunate that they're here in our region, and they've been growing. But a lot of biotech companies. So on the companion animal side, you have, just like on the human side, monoclonal antibodies, cell therapy, gene therapy. So you have these really niche therapeutic areas. It's really changing the way that medicine is delivered on the companion animal side.
Do you see a lot of crossover with some of the other industries? You talk about biotech and some of the things. We have a biotech growing biotech sector here. Maybe even cybersecurity and some of the things we've heard about, securing food systems, people becoming more and more aware of the different, risks to the value chain, the supply chain. Do you see a lot of crossover strengths with other industries here in the region and what we see as the animal health industry?
Yeah, definitely for all of that in the biotech space. I mean, some of the reasons why the animal health corridor has grown and really took root here is a crossover of that. The companies that are here, a lot of these companies have been here for over 100 years. And when you look at the Midwest, a lot of communities, a lot of states can say they're an ag-based economy, right?
Yep.
And so are we.
Yep.
So that's not really unique in the middle of the country. But what was unique for Kansas City and what made our industry really grow and, nurturing it has made it take off was the stockyards and the rail hub. We had the second largest stockyard to Chicago, second rail hub to Chicago. So when you have that transportation right here in the middle of the country, this is where the animals came down to the stockyards. What was naturally born out of that were companies that needed to keep the animals healthy through medicine and through food. So we have feed ingredient companies here, nutrition companies, and then so it was just an industry that was naturally born out of that.
Yeah.
In the early 2000s, when a lot of communities were trying to decide, bio was, kind of the buzzword, what is our strengths? Our region did an asset mapping. It came back that animal health was this large sector. It was a surprise. That's not what, we expected, but it's like when something is always part of your background, it's part of just the fabric of who you are, it doesn't feel special or unique.
You're not the bright, shiny new thing.
It doesn't.
We always want the new thing.
Yeah,
Right.
and, so it's just, when things have been here for 100 years, it's just, you take it, when you're here, you almost take it for granted.
Absolutely. No, I see that. Yeah. We, a little known Keystone fact, a little tidbit about our naming, the reason that we're named Keystone. It's, what you see is a keystone species from a biology perspective, but the Hannibal Bridge, which was the first permanent crossing of the Missouri River. In 1860, Kansas City was the 10th largest city in this region. Some leaders from Kansas City went to D.C. and won the rights to build the Hannibal Bridge away from St. Joe and Independence. And in 1867, they started constructing that bridge, opened it in 1869, and in 1870, this was the largest city by 10 times in this region because of that permanent crossing. And it was the birth of communications, transportation, that was the birth of the stockyards and
Right.
the relationship to Chicago with the railway system, and then communications. And we forget those legacy industries that were created by the Hannibal Bridge being built are the foundation of this economy and have been for over 100 years. The company that built that bridge, the Keystone Bridge Company. So that's one of the reasons that we named this Keystone.
I love that.
But I think we forget what's been paying the bills for over 100 years, what's been the legacy of the region, and we do want to look at these maybe emerging technology spaces. And I don't think a lot of people think of animal health as an emerging technology space, but it is. I mean, some of the things you've laid out it's certainly the front side of a lot of different technologies and innovations and research.
Heavy science and technology based. And, I don't think, on the surface, we do a lot of work in the schools trying to, educate and bring up that next generation of talent. And when you say animal health, people think farmer, producer, veterinarian, and we've done surveys on this over and over again, zookeeper, or like a shelter worker. And those are all great. Sure. And they are all part of the ecosystem. It's just a really limiting view of the impact. They forget that farms, that those are highly technical. There is so much automation and so much technology for crops and for animals. And the feed and the feed conversion and the therapeutics to keep the animals healthy, that's very, very science-based, and it has to be, there's not a lot of margin there. So it has to be very precise. And that's why when you have companies like Cirrus Tag who are developing these technologies that can help these producers, get more protein out on the animal, it's critical. I mean, that's the only way that this industry is going to continue to advance forward. And then, and if you look on the companion animal side, it's the same thing. There's a lot of demand from pet owners. They want the same therapeutics that we have. It's like, it's like our health. You have
I want my dog to live forever.
exercise.
Yeah.
You have to eat right, and and you need the right medicine, and people demand that and want that, and it's very, very scientific.
Let's get a little bit more tactical about those segments that you're talking about. So you've got companion animal versus production animal. You've got the pharma, nutrition, diagnostics, devices, services. Like there's a whole span of things there. Where is the money actually concentrated? And where are the margins maybe healthiest? If you're an investor and you're thinking about this space.
Well, it depends on how patient you are.
Sure. Yeah, important.
The margins are higher on the companion side, for sure.
Is that consumer pricing, just like, I mean, that the consumer is willing to pay anything for their pet? That kind of,
Yeah. There isn't a lot of margin in general on the food animal side. So cost of goods, and just even implementing something on the farm or even in the clinic, right? So that's a lot of things that we talk to for investors and for entrepreneurs. They have to understand really the systems and the processes, whether it's in a clinic or on a farm, how that works, because just the disruption of bringing in something new can stop it from moving forward, right? And even the delivery of therapeutics. I mean, Tammy knows this well, right? It's if you have these specialty therapeutics, it has to, ideally be able to be delivered by a general practitioner. If you have to go to a specialty hospital, the prices go up, but it's harder for adoption.
Sure. On the companion animal side, it's like you have, I think, alluded to, it's been the darling in the industry for a while. Pet humanization, some of the other whole thesis kind of trends that we've seen, are those theses, are they still intact? Are we starting to see cracks in kind of that perception in the market? Or do you think that's still kind of an upward trend that we're seeing in the animal health space?
I think it's still an upward trend, but certainly when the economy, there's strain in the economy, it impacts disposable income and what people can spend. So, I would say if you look at the latest data that we had from we do every 6 months we have a market report done that by Analytics that takes all the data from vet clinic visits and spends and everything on the food animal side. There's certainly strain, but anytime there's strain in the economy, you see that, but people are still taking their pets in. On the companion animal side, I alluded to it at the era of the cat. We do see this is a new area. If you look at, and it goes back to the economy, home ownership, the average age now for a first-time home buyer is closer to 40. And so people are living in multi-unit houses longer. It's easier, lifestyle, maybe they travel for work, to have a cat versus a dog, right? So cat ownership is up and dog ownership is down. But historically, all the therapeutics and all of the investment on the companion animal side was largely
Was on the
for
dog side,
dogs.
yeah.
And so there's a real shift right now. And so we are seeing and we are working with a number of companies. Some are early stage, some are not, some are established companies that are looking at our marketplace for vaccine lines specifically for feline. So we do see that as a growing area. There's some challenges with that because you have to be able to do clinical trials. Tammy knows this well. You have to go in species. That's not been set up. And so now there's a whole system that has to be set up where you have to develop the whole clinical trial network for felines to be able to get new therapeutics, but there's a demand for that. Cats, just like dogs, right? They used to be in the barn. They used to be outside. Now they're inside. Now they're in your bed. And just as you have that humanization, the demand for nutrition is up. There is a lot of investment in wet pet food for cats as well. So we see a lot of investment and a lot of focus in that area that is new.
You referenced the regulatory overhead in the space. Walk us through that kind of regulatory pathway. Is it truly different than kind of in the human health space? And what do founders and investors, underestimate as it relates to the regulatory headwinds or challenges in animal health?
Yeah, I think the investors, just don't understand it. Entrepreneurs can underestimate that. Animal health is, human health is one species, and the products go through FDA. Animal health is a lot of species, and depending on what it is, so if it's a vaccine, it goes through USDA. If it's pharma or food, it goes through FDA. If it's topical pour-ons, it goes through EPA. So in the animal health industry, there are actually 3 regulatory bodies depending on what your product is. And so understanding the timeframes and the requirements, you have to have the right regulatory expert. And there are individuals out there that are experts in each one of those areas. And, if someone tells you they're an expert in all of them, keep interviewing
like
probably.
It.
But
An expert in nothing, generalists.
But it can, comparatively to human health, you can get products to market quicker. But there is a perception sometimes, and especially if it's an innovator that's coming from the human side into animal, they're like, oh, it's just easier. We can just make our money here. And we see that a lot, or there's a perception that there isn't a regulatory path. And so we see that a lot. Another area that is growing, just like on the human side, is in the supplement space. So you see a lot of supplements for animal health. They kind of fall in a little bit in a gray area. Mostly,
Like dogs to be healthier.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got
Little
it.
joint
I
pain,
got it.
a little vitamin, yeah.
The production animal side is huge. It's enormous. What are but it's also, I think historically we've all considered it we've seen it on the commodity markets. It's been viewed as a commodity space for a really long time. What are some of the exciting things that you're seeing happen on that side of the animal health spectrum? In terms, you talk about the direct to satellite, you talk about some of those things that are happening. What are some other things that are happening on that side that are exciting for you or that you think are going to be investable as we move forward?
I think a lot of the technology space is exciting. Aquaculture is huge. That's growing. We don't do that here, surprise. But so I don't work with a lot of companies in that space, but that is definitely growing. That's a high protein demand globally. When you look at shrimp and salmon and some of those protein sources. Yeah, I would say, a really technology. They're, producers have to try to figure out, working on these thin margins,
Absolutely.
how they get, genetics is big on that food animal side. How do we produce more animals that have that higher feed conversion? And it's just like siblings, right? Some of us have better feed conversion than others, right? It's like how do we replicate those that less intake for higher output?
Yeah, yield. It's managing against that yield. So you have had the opportunity, I want to shift gears a little bit. You have had the opportunity to run the Corridors Investment Forum and has helped companies raise, I think, over $90 million collectively through that
Yeah,
forum.
almost $1 billion.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. From watching that deal flow over the years that you guys have been doing that, what does a fundable animal health company look like as it comes through in an early stage?
That is a great question. And, one of the things that we have to remind some of our, lovingly, I call them science snobs, is that it's not always the most novel idea. It's not always the most novel molecule that is going to make money.
Sure.
And, it was funny, one year there was a company, and it was really in the behavior space. And some of the scientists on our selection committee just could not get over the idea that we would put on stage to pitch for money what they viewed as really a toy. But it was for, and it was kind of a toy, but it helped reduce anxiety. And, anxiety and separation and the behaviors that come from that are some of the top reasons why pets are relinquished. And so there's a whole behavior category. It has a really important space. And for a homeowner, right, you don't want your dog or cat scratching everything, or so and it was funded and it moved forward, and they just couldn't, it just kind of blew their mind that but so I just think it's always important that it's no different than any industry. The companies that get funded are those that have clearly identified what their solution is to a problem that needs solved, what their cost of goods are, how they're going to get to market. In animal health, the go-to-market strategies are vastly different depending on what the products are. Understanding exactly what that pathway is and your time to market. And you have to have a really clear vision of that, and you have to be able to articulate that, and then you need the right team. Investors in any industry, they're betting on the team to implement all of that. So it's probably no different than any other industry. There's just some layers of complexity depending on if it is a regulated product, understanding, do they have the right, regulatory support? Do they have the right understanding of what that's going to take?
As I'm listening to you talk about this, it strikes me that maybe one of the complexities is the fact that we don't understand how animals, we don't have the ability. I can think of lived experiences for humans and for the value that it gives to me and my maybe lived experience.
Yeah.
Oftentimes the wrong way to think about it as an investor, because it's not always, your use case of one, or, But at least I can relate. Whereas when you're talking about behavioral health for an animal, it's like, do we really know what the dog's thinking? Like, I think I know what my dog thinks of me, or I think I know when
No,
my
but you know
dog
what
is
the
anxiety.
behaviors they're
I think,
doing.
yeah, but do I?
Yeah.
Do I know what is causing? Like, is it
Yeah.
harder for me to like believe that
Right,
that
yeah.
this is gonna, is that thunder jacket really gonna help my dog with his anxiety, or is
Hey,
that just
that's
a?
another one that was,
Yeah,
it
no, that's what I
worked.
mean.
That's,
I own one, so
that's in the
yeah.
behavior category, right?
Yeah, but I just wonder if it's that lack of, relational understanding as an investor to be able to say, oh, I get it, when you're not sure because you just have that gap in terms of
Yeah.
understanding some of those things. I'm sure it's a variety of things in understanding what true value is in that space, maybe especially on the companion animal side.
Yeah.
Um,
And you probably, for some of those categories, you'd have to have an investment group that really understood the animal health space and animal health sector. Some of that would be hard probably to get a crossover investment from a portfolio that typically does a digital health or a life science, and then they can see some applicability. But
So as when we talk about deal flow, what does the investor profile look like? Early stage, seed stage. We talk about growing the corridor and growing the work you're doing. What is the investment? I mean, do we have those investors here within the corridor? Is that a struggle to try to align local, regional investors to some of those opportunities here in this area?
I think it's a struggle. Yeah. Um, Most investment, not all, but most investment that companies secure end up coming from outside of the region. So organizationally, I spend a lot of time making sure that I know investors that will invest in the space. Most of the investors in animal health are really location agnostic. So they're not going to require generally someone to move
Sure.
to any location.
Sure.
So whether capital comes from Kansas City or not, I can still work to try to get a company to locate here. And if I can connect them with an investor, we have great talent here in this space. I mean, that's a huge strength of our area. We have so much talent and so much depth of knowledge from the commercial side to the scientific side to the regulatory to distribution. All of the distributors are in our marketplace. And that's a huge go-to-market strategy for a lot of the product verticals. So having all of that here is a real asset for companies to want to be here. But funding, it's a struggle.
Yeah.
And it's really a struggle, I would say, at that early stage level. And that's where you need the local community. And so that's why I said, if I can support you in any
Yeah,
angel
yeah.
investing that you can do
I'm gonna
and
take you
get
up on
more
that.
people
Sure.
that are interested in diversifying their wealth portfolio into early stage innovators and entrepreneurs here in our region and animal health, I would love to support that because that is a huge gap. Once they get far enough along,
Yep.
they're not that it's easy, it's never easy. Fundraising is hard,
Yep.
but there become more options.
But since it's more geographically independent in terms of the decision making, once you get to the institutional side, it's a little easier. So is it the pre-seed, seed, kind of those early, even maybe, even earlier than that, the proof of
Yeah.
concept kind of funding that's a struggle?
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
in Kim's wish list of things the region had. So I find it interesting because a lot of times when we're trying to attract companies to Kansas City, the story we always hear is there talent there to sustain? Is there talent there to grow? And what I hear you saying is that's not the challenge that we have in this space.
No,
So what's on your wish list of things we need in this region to help you grow, especially if our goal is to grow startup density and really try to support more of these future enterprise of the region coming here? What do we need to do? What do you need more of?
early stage investment.
Okay.
I would love to see more support and programs at the state level for entrepreneurs.
What's a good example of one you wish we have more of? And it doesn't have to be in our current state,
Yeah.
but like another state that's doing something.
Yeah, I think that when we had the KBA, I think some of their programs and that model was perfect. It was set up in a way where, it was the same funding stream, right? So both states have programs, they call it different things, where they take the withholding taxes and then they give it back, where they just they basically tiffed the state for life sciences, put those withholding taxes over there, and they could make investments that were, had more time and fit an early stage company need where the traditional programs don't really work, they don't really fit. Angel tax credit investment, that's great, but I wish that we had more options of non-diluted capital at the state level to support entrepreneurs. Maybe a dollar for dollar match for some angel investors here. I don't know what that looks like, but I do think we need more early capital support. I would love to see the universities have a dedicated point of contact that would help entrepreneurs navigate the entire ecosystem of the university and pull in, that they know who are the researchers, what are they working on, what PIs, have expertise in this area. How do we really surround an entrepreneur and support their innovation at the university level? We're here in the market, and it's hard to figure out what doors to knock on sometimes.
Where's that disconnect? I mean, if we've got the talent, that would indicate to me that the universities have a focus in this area, right? That they're the ones generating some of the talent that you're talking about, or is that spin-off talent from some of the companies that are already headquartered here more? Okay.
We have pretty seasoned talent here
Got ya.
because we've had the industry here for so long.
We have some research strengths in this. It's just there's no Sherpa that really helps the PI navigate that system from a commercialization perspective.
Out, how do you bring it all together? And so I would love to have, years ago, I don't know if you remember Steve Wyatt at the University of Missouri. Fantastic. He was the provost of economic development, and he served in that role. You called Steve, and he navigated the entire university. And it does, the University of Missouri, there were times where you had that One Health, where you could get someone from the med school and the vet med school, right? Because there were reasons for them both to be at the table. So just having that point of contact, that would be amazing. And I think that would really help streamline how to navigate. And I think it would allow the universities to have more connection with companies. Right. I just think it's hard. And the speed at which they move needs to, match industry.
Sure.
So capital, a point person at universities.
Yep.
And we need more biomanufacturing talent. We are growing in the biomanufacturing space. Our existing companies are making large investments. They're growing their footprint, which is fantastic. And a lot of it is because of these new therapeutic areas. But we need more biomanufacturing talent at the certification level. So we really have, to your point, enough output at the four-year university level. We don't need to stop, we need to continue, but that it's sufficient. But it's really at that certification level. And we spend a lot of time going into high schools trying to educate about the opportunity for a great career. I mean, these are high-paying, great jobs, 24, 36 credit hours, you can go in and build a career, and these companies will pay for additional education. So it's a great career path, but it sounds scary. The stigma of like, what does that mean? I don't even know it. So if you talk to teachers, if you talk to parents, you talk to students, we don't, or they self-elect out thinking, well, I'm not really good at math or science, or I don't think, and, so just trying to build that pipeline. We have great programs. We've been bringing the educational providers at the community college level and at the university level together, saying, okay, we need alignment in our educational path. And when someone says they have a biotechnology certification program, it needs to be the same skills from, regardless of which institution they got the certification from.
Yeah, that standardization is important.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
North Carolina, with their BioWorks program, they do a phenomenal job at that.
Okay.
We have not coordinated that here. It's more complex with the state line.
I was going to say, is that a what, typical Kansas City issue where you've got two states you have to deal with, not one kind of thing?
It does adds a layer of complexity.
Sure.
And, in North Carolina, at the state level, they came up with the program and they licensed it out to every community college in North Carolina. In Kansas City, we can't really do that. We have to get both states to just agree that they'll,
It seems like this sector is important. Maybe I'm preaching to the choir. I'm sure I am here, but it seems like this sector is important enough to this region because the corridor is Columbia. I mean, it's to have that. Hey, can we sit down and solve this at a by-state level?
Yeah. And we have had those conversations, and the educational institutions are in alignment.
Yeah.
And we're getting there.
You're going to tell me it's the legislatures that aren't?
No, they're all good on that. But now it's the marketing language, just getting into the schools. We created a workforce campaign last year to help solve for some of this, and kind of just break down, basically making food and medicine for animals. That's much more relatable and understandable than biomanufacturing.
Yeah.
I have no idea what you're talking about. When
it
you
goes
say
back to that
to
stigma you were talking about earlier.
15, 16, 17, 18-year-old that, I don't know, I'm not capable of that. But we need more biomanufacturing.
Okay. What have programs like Plug and Play landing in Topeka meant to the region, and is there enough demand or enough opportunity for us to have more of that type of program to bring those early stage companies here?
Yeah, I love accelerators.
Okay.
I think they're phenomenal. Plug and Play does a fantastic job. We work very closely with their team. DFA has an accelerator.
Yep.
They do fantastic.
Are they still doing that? Okay,
they
great.
are.
Yep.
Yeah. And, I love when companies go through an accelerator before they apply to our program.
Mm-hmm.
They're just so much better prepared.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just hard to get we take applications for our program every year between January and April 1st. We just closed applications. We had 58 companies apply from 18 countries. So it's and we have 14 slots.
Wow.
They're all pretty good.
Yeah.
So it's hard. You have to narrow down to 14. Fortunately, we as a staff don't have to do it. We have a great selection committee, and they hash it out and do it based on a rubric. But there are companies that don't get accepted every year that absolutely should be accepted, but if they've gone through an accelerator, their applications are always just so much more honed in. They've really flushed out their business case, and they just really have a lot better direction and a lot better feedback directly already from strategics that they can build into their pitch deck. And so I love accelerators.
What is, so I know I'm going to use Launch KC as a parallel in terms of the grant that they offer and so on. They also offer programming to the cohort that comes in. Do you guys offer any programming associated to the companies that get in the forum, that get in and are selected?
No, we don't. They get paired, so the companies that are selected get paired with what we call an industry coach. We have a group of individuals from the industry that volunteer their time every year. It's usually about 40. We wait till we see which companies are selected. We look at the coaches and we try to match, depending on what the application is, what, species or therapeutic area, to the experience of the coaches. We have way more coaches than we have companies. Sometimes we pair up, based on the feedback from the selection committee. If they say, this company probably needs to understand the regulatory path a little bit better, or I have questions about the strength of their patents, or they need patent protection before, they get too much further along. We have all of that expertise in the cohort, so we may put 2 or 3 coaches with a company to help them. And then the other coaches, we have practice pitch sessions, and all of the coaches listen and provide that feedback to them in real time. So it's really about preparing their investor profile and their pitch deck, getting ready to pitch at the summit.
Yeah, absolutely. Get them
it's
the check, get them the money.
Yeah, it's 8 weeks, and it's very much just focused on honing in that pitch.
So one of the things we found certainly attracts investors is successful exits, right? Like it's that flywheel effect of, we've had a couple cycles of interesting exits in Kansas City. And as soon as you see that, you see this spike in interest in some of those other things. It's the FOMO effect, I guess.
Yeah.
What does a successful exit look like in your space relative to, human health, what we see in the life sciences space there, or a SaaS, something that, investors might understand differently in terms of things like multiples and other things? What does a successful animal health exit look like?
Yeah, a lot of the companies that come through, they do get investment. I would say a large percentage of them end up at a strategic.
Okay. It's those big four,
And
those big,
it's just long term. It's really hard in our industry to have one product and just maintain that, long term. And so companies can move their product along, right? Eventually, it either is going to get consolidated up or moved on to a strategic. There are times that, they may have a platform where they end up developing multiple technologies, but most of the time, even if an investor comes in, they're looking to ultimately spin that out.
What kind of impact is AI having on the animal health industry?
Yeah, it touches everything. It's used heavily in R&D, but when you think about, and data is used, there's a lot of data collection that's used. When you think about in clinic, AI it's an overlay in everything and anything on the farm. So it's like any other industry, it's. And it's funny you asked that. I should have counted. Of the 58 companies, there's a large number of them that have something AI.
Yeah.
Something AI. So
we've been having a lot of conversations about AI enhanced companies versus AI native companies, and what's the difference, and which ones have are more investable or have the longevity related to AI. I was just curious. Had this conversation with Dick Flanagan and others on the digital health side, on the human health side, talking about how innovation and AI adoption is happening at the speed of trust. Dick always likes to talk about the speed of trust in that industry. And is it the same thing on the animal health side? Is that, is adoption going to be faster because trust is different in terms of, these being, call them life critical things that are happening to patients, which are the animals in this instance, that kind of thing. Or what is what are you seeing trend-wise on the AI side?
Yeah, that's interesting. I just participated in, I say just a couple months ago, I participated in watching, I guess. There was research done on this. And so, you bring people in, it's a consumer market group, and you get to sit behind the two-way mirror. And this was all in clinic. And universally, everyone wanted AI if it created efficiency. If it created efficiency in scheduling an appointment or paperwork or payment or, some sort of process that they would have to do, they wanted efficiency. But there was a lot of pushback, which I found this really fascinating, on the use of AI in the exam room when the veterinarian was examining the pet or treating the pet. And you go into the doctor, how they talk, and it just that talk to text, and it puts it in the notes.
Yep.
They did not want that.
Really?
And there were, it was a week-long thing, and there were multiple groups, and do
you get to hear the qualitative side of that? Like, what's the rationale for that?
Yeah, they did not trust that, and they wanted the doctor to type or to write or like a vet tech to be in there. So I found that really fascinating because I don't think when I go into a doctor's office, I have a choice to tell them, no, you have to write that. You have to type that.
Look, my dad was a physician, and if you've ever seen a physician write anything, they have the worst handwriting on the planet, I think.
So I thought that was was super fascinating. There was some distrust with that.
Okay.
And they're just like the AI agents or whatever, like asking online and stuff. They wanted to know that there was a real person.
Sure, human intervention of some kind in that.
On the other end.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think
that wasn't surprising. I think, we all kind of want that, who am I talking to? But I did find it really fascinating that every group almost universally was super uncomfortable with that.
Interesting. The Digital Health KC Day last year, they did a panel beforehand. They were here the night before for an event, and they talked about people's trust if their doctors were if they knew their doctor was using AI in some way versus wasn't, they trusted the doctors that were actually using it more than they trusted the doctors that weren't. Now they didn't, I don't think, got specific to the watching. I don't think it was the same level of in-clinic study behind the glass kind of research that was being done. But I found that fascinating that there was a higher level of trust of physicians if they were using it versus not. And I don't know if it's just, that means my doctor is modern. My doctor is like up to speed on what's happening versus the one that's...
so much data that, I would agree with, I would feel that way too.
Sure.
And even on the, for a veterinarian, there's so much data and so much new information that's coming out, and it just has the ability to scrape and scour across so many different websites. It doesn't replace your, discernment of that information to make a medical decision, but it does help make sure that you have all of that current information. But yeah, there was that was surprising.
Kim, one of the other areas I wanted to ask you about, as we talk about innovation and the difference between innovation and invention, right? Innovation is taking things that exist today, things that we know, and using them in different ways to solve either new problems or problems that have existed in the past versus invention is the new thing. The One Health thesis, this idea of translational between human, animal, environmental, is that, how strong is that trend still? Is that an investable thesis in your opinion? Are we still seeing a lot of patterns in that One Health space today?
Yes, to a certain extent. So what I have seen, and I really haven't seen this change much, is at the R&D level, there's a lot of learning and crossover. When it gets to the commercialization, animal health commercialization and go-to-market is just very different than human health, and that's where the divergence happens. So at an R&D level, yes. When it comes to commercialization and investment, it's really different.
Makes sense. Markets are different. Segment, customers are different. Those types of things. Yeah. So if we talked a little bit about talent and some of the regional gaps that you've seen. What's the most important lead indicator that you watch for the industry right now?
Oof.
Whether it's the region or whether it's on a macro basis
no,
from an
just the
industry
macro,
perspective.
Is the consolidation and private equity investment. There's just been, in the 15 years that I've been in this role, significant consolidation in the industry. When I started, there were probably, I don't know, a list of 20 on the pharma side, and you can really narrow that down now. And there's more private equity. That's good. But there's the reverse side of that too.
Drives different behaviors.
Yeah. And we also see, I talked about talent in the animal health space, and we're really rich in talent in our region, and we're really blessed with that. There is a lot of, and I would say animal health historically the talent has been, individuals that have gone through animal science programs or individuals that grew up with an ag-based background or a veterinarian, parent or some sort of affiliation. We are really seeing other industries coming into animal health. I think it's good.
Yeah.
But it is changing the dynamic of the industry. And it's a pretty small, tight-knit industry globally.
Yep.
Everybody tends to kind of know everybody, or
Sure.
some,
6 degrees of separation kind of thing. Kevin Bacon. Yeah, I got you.
But as new leaders come in, that we see a lot coming from consumer products, and they have a different mindset, and so I'm seeing culture shifts.
Okay.
Not concerning, but it's just
shifts that you have to pay attention to. Yeah.
And the way they make decisions and the way they evaluate investments or where they want their companies or want their locations, it's really different than what it's historically been. And they don't have the just kind of native connection to, a Kansas City where the industry has been, or, other markets where maybe there's been a concentration of the industry. So it is, with the private equity and new leaders coming in, there is a culture shift and the consolidation.
Yeah, it makes total sense. So if you're, for the founders, operators, investors that we're talking to, what's the one thing that you wish they were paying more attention to as the person who's responsible for marketing and representing the industry in the corridor and in the region, what's the one thing you wish people were paying more attention to?
For for the innovators, for the entrepreneurs, my advice to them would be is to really understand how the adoption of their technology, how it fits in. I think there's an underestimation sometimes of, you know, they're so sold on their technology and the solution they're solving for that they haven't thought about how that fits into the flow and how, the disruption it causes to incorporate anything new into a system.
Yep.
And
these are systems that have been around for such a long time.
Yeah. And producers are not, depending on the vintage of the producer, easily changing or adopting new ways or new technologies. Veterinarians traditionally aren't really looking to make those changes either. So I think there's an underestimation sometimes of how hard it's going to be on the adoption side.
Got you. All right.
And so just really understanding the industry.
Yep.
In that way. I think the rest, it's like anything, you can help solve for
Sure, fixable.
a lot of business plans and things like that. For the region, what I would love the region is to not forget the importance of animal health. I think we talk a lot about the animal health corridor and the significance and the importance of it, but it's not the shiny new thing, right? And agriculture, sometimes when we talk about that, it's not always sexy. It's not, it doesn't sound like it's the most forward-thinking thing. It is.
Right.
But I think sometimes as a region, we're always looking to do something new or fresh, or that we forget that we need to take care of the legacy of what we have and continue to invest in that and continue to support. Not that we don't move forward, but I just think Kansas City culturally, we tend to want to jump from one thing to the other, and instead of just, being okay to grow the things that we have.
Yeah, no, I've seen that trend in our space, regardless of whether it's on the innovation side or the development side, the new projects we get excited about versus the ones that have long-term plans, those types of things. So I feel your pain on that all the time.
Yeah.
Kim, I want to thank you for being a champion for Kansas City, and I watched you represent us on the global stage or in the national stage in this segment, in this sector. And so thank you for representing the region the way you do. Thank you for representing the animal health space the way you do and championing that work here. Let us know what we can do to help, what we can do if there are programming ideas. We're certainly open to those types of things. Anything that we can do to help you grow the innovation, the entrepreneurial, the corporate kind of engagement sector.
Yeah, maybe we host one of our networking receptions here.
Would love it. Would love it. Let's do it.
It's a great space, and like to just continue deepening the partnership.
Perfect. Well, thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for sharing and giving us some insight into where we're headed with animal health and what we can do. So everybody give her a hand. Come down.